Okay, hello everybody. Can you hear me loud and clearly? So welcome to hopefully an exciting session around how to deliver insight and intelligent action with Dynamics 365. Hope you had a great day 3 of Ignite. I'm sure you're overwhelmed with all the technology we have been showing, what you have been learning about from quantum computing through machine learning and AI and everything. So one thing Satya said in his keynote on Monday was, it's not about the technology, it's about the business problem you can solve with it. So I think that's what Santosh and I will talk about the next 75 minutes. How can you apply, all this great technology, especially AI and big data analytics, to the domain of customer analytics? So real quick, I want to start with a quote from Bernard Marr. Some of you might know he's kind of a thought leader in the space of big data analytics. He's been working with many customers and found a lot of issues. Despite the technology being there, a lot of these projects fail. And what he said is the reality is that most organizations are already data rich, but insight poor. And that's really the problem we are solving with a new product we have been developing called Customer Insights, which is actually bringing all the Microsoft technology together to learn from customer data you have already. So in that session, I think we really want to take you through the end-to-end demo. Santosh will show you how this can be done, how you connect to different data sources, how you can apply machine learning to it, how you then can make predictions to it and actually show that to your business users. So I think it will be pretty exciting. So before we do that, I would just want to spend a few minutes on setting the context before we go into the technology very deep. All of you have heard about the term Customer 360. So I'm in the CRM space for more than 25 years, so everybody has been talking about this. Reality is nobody achieved it. So I have been talking to a CRO of a major bank, and he said he did spend his whole career trying to achieve Customer 360 view, and finally he gave up shortly before he retired. And he said, it's impossible. I think it's possible because now we have the technology to do it differently. And now let me talk about the new way of doing Customer 360. In the past, it was mainly centered around transactional data. People looked at CRM systems. They have been pulling in more data from other sources, but found limitation there. Today, it's about all data. There's so much data out there. And there's technology how you can actually bring all customer data you have, behavioral data, transactional data, internal and external data. So that's a big difference. In the past, it was a top-down approach. So if you are in the BI space for a long time, the past when thinking about data marts, enterprise data warehouses, it was all about defining the schema first, then building the ETL tools, bringing in the data, cleaning it. This is a complex and lengthy process. In Customer 360, you have every week the business coming with new kinds of data they want to bring in. And that's a challenge here. So what big data enables is really to take a bottom-up approach. Create a schema on read. Whenever you have a new data source, it must be much, much easier to connect that to your Customer 360 view. And you will see that how we do that. In the past, it was nice to have. Customer 360 is kind of these holy terms everybody is using. But little businesses actually felt, well, it's a competitive edge. Today, it's all about Customer 360. Unless you cannot differentiate yourself. You cannot achieve a customer experience which people are expecting these days. And then finally, custom-built solutions, what we had in the past, we are rigid. So customers did that for one organization. They did that for one line of business. But then the moment another unit came in or a region, then it all fall apart because you had to rechange. You had to rechange the data model and do it all over again. Today, what we will show you, it's more a fluid kind of architecture. So you can expand that, you can model it. Everything what you see is metadata driven. So we bring all the benefits of a SaaS solution to the domain of customer analytics. Last but not least, for the end users, often it has been overwhelming. Complex UIs, lots of different data, but they couldn't do anything with it. So the big part of it is, unless you can turn the data and the insight into action for real people like you and me in the sales, marketing, and service domain, it's useless. So I think that has been the key driver for us developing this product. But what I like the most is saying, well, many people still think Customer 360, big data analytics, that's still illusionary to achieve. It's too expensive, it takes too much time. So hopefully after this session you will agree that now with Dynamics 365 it's finally feasible and affordable. And that's a big thing here. We really want to simplify that, making it much, much easier for partners, for customers to use all the Azure services and to achieve this customer 360 view and doing advanced analytics without having, let's say, all these pitfalls in place. So real quick, I think most of you know what Dynamics 365 is all about, so I won't spend too much time on it, but think about it's based on Azure. It provides a set of modular applications targeting the needs and process requirements of marketing, sales, and service departments, but it doesn't stop there. Think about talent management, operations, financials. We address all the needs a small or medium or large-sized organization has. But then, where we think the value is created is when you can actually create insights on top of the data which is created by all these modular applications and turn that into action. And that is what Customer Insights is all about, which I will talk about now. Before I do that, and Santosh will have a great example derived from a real customer project we have been working with, I wanted to start giving you a picture of how Customer 360, how that is evolving, and actually what is best practice for doing that. So our view is you should start with Customer Insights. That's a foundation layer. Think about this as a new Azure service, which makes it very easy to use the big data analytics services in Dynamics 365 and in the Azure suite. But then it's all about the data. So what kind of data are we talking about? You all have seen the graphs throughout the week. So I will build up this graph, which is kind of a graph of graphs, if you'd like, to build this Customer 360 view. All the customers I've been working with, of course, they start with CRM data and entities. So accounts, contacts, activities, leads, whatever you have there. So this is information usually stored in CRM systems. That's where it should be. We make it very, very easy to take these data, put it into Customer Insights, which is based on an Azure data lake, and start with that. So that's a matter of 10 minutes maybe. It's really plug and play. And customers are surprised how easy it is to do that. But we don't stop there. Next step would be to add email information. You might have heard about a service we call Relationship Insights. What that is, we take email, calendar information from Office 365, from Exchange, put that into the same data lake, if you will, Customer Insights, and combine the dots, connect the dots based on the email identities and what we have in the CRM system. So that's expanding your graph, and that's very easy to be done. Of course, we can go on. Social information. Some of you might know our service called Microsoft Social Engagement that enables businesses to listen into social communications on Facebook, on Twitter, on whatever you have. You set up your search topics, and then you will get a rich stream of data, a big stream of data, actually, a fire hose of conversations out there. Now think about, you can bring that into Customer Insights. You can expand the graph and add social communication to that, all of one customer profile. And then, of course, let's go on LinkedIn. I mean, that's a very popular service with salespeople. Now think about that. You can add LinkedIn information, relationship information you have there to that picture. So that's actually the Microsoft, what we call packaged connectors, first-party connectors, where we want to make it very, very easy for customers to use all the data Microsoft has, let's say, in our services. And that's something I would call a quick win. It's not like you have to go out to ask a partner to build out a complex interface. No, you turn it on. It feels like a service which can be turned on, and then you have those data. But of course, it doesn't stop there. We have partners like InsightView, like Versium, like many other partners who actually provide data connectivity over AppSource, which is available very easily to augment, again, this customer 360 view you have there. So in case of InsightView, think about that you can add company news, company data, how many employees do they have, and that is adding to the customer data you have in your CRM system. Versium, same thing, they have rich lead information for B2C and B2B environments where you actually can augment the lead data you have in your system. But again, it's not kind of isolated. It's building up the graph step by step, and it's all connected, so you can reason over it. That's a key thing here. And then last but not least, it's about connecting to all the custom data sources you have. I mean, if you are a bigger organization, I would bet you have legacy CRM system there, you have legacy ERP systems, you might have custom applications. And this is where it gets harder. A lot of customers I talk to, they say, well, that's great what you're talking about, but how do I get data out of SAP and put it in here? Or how do I get data out of a legacy Siebel application? Of course, I think it's not that easy like turning on our social engagement connector, but it can be done using our integration technology for that. The message here is you shouldn't start with that what's hard. Start with the data you already have, which provides a value add to your sales and marketing and service people. Then see how it goes, and then over time add more and more data sources. So the message is Customer 360 is a journey. It starts with the first step. Many customers struggle getting from 0 to 1. They don't struggle from getting 0 to 100 in one giant leap. So Customer Insights is enabling that. Without a lot of financial upfront commitment, with a lot of flexibility, what you have from a cloud service, you can do that and then expand without any constraints here. Okay, so before I hand over to Santosh, a quick view, what is Customer Insights? And again, Santosh will go very deep on that. It's a service which allows you to take data from any source. That's what we call data inflow. Think about that. We are now providing connectors, which allows you to extract data from CRM, from social, from Office, clean it up and put it into this, let's say, new service called Customer Insights. Second thing is that we then model all these data as profiles, interactions, KPIs, and relationships. You will see that in action in a second. So that we have a generic model how we can talk about the customer view here. And then predictive match enables you to mesh up the data, to fuse data from different sources and map strong and weak identities and really make sure that you have a clean database. You could call it deduplication or fuzzy search. You will hear about that, but that's a key capability of that service, that you can actually get one view of disparate data sources coming together here. Then it's about applying predictive analytics, machine learning to this set, and ultimately doing segmentation, and the Customer 360 view is about visualizing this data. So I think that's what this is all about, but again, think about connecting to data sources you have, cleaning it up, matching it, gaining insight from it, and then providing business applications back to your line of business users. That's what this service is all about. So what we are most proud of as a product team is that this is not something we have invented kind of, let's say, in Redmond, never talking to any customer. No, it has been purely customer and partner driven. So here you see a couple of customers which have been our defining customers. Metro Bank, well-known customer, the banking industry. So they really said, well, if you really can help us achieving a Customer 360 view and reducing the average call handling time in our call center by 5 seconds, that will save us £200 per month. Just by making it more efficiently for agents and tellers in the bank to more easily consume customer-related data. That's their business case. Think about Marston's. This is a pub operating company in the UK and beer brewing company, great beer. And they all what they want to do is to leverage the data they have to have a more targeted marketing. Today they send out, let's say, bulk email campaigns to all of their 5 million customers without any differentiation. But they have all the data. They have Wi-Fi data. They know when somebody is logging into the Wi-Fi going to one of their pubs. They have table reservation information. They know all of that. But they didn't have a place where to put the data and to reason over it. Now with Customer Insights, they can do that. And that's a small organization. They have a 5-person IT organization. Don't think that they have data scientists or they can afford to go with a partner and say, do a 360 project. It doesn't work. But they have social engagement. They have Dynamics 365. Now, when we showed them this, and they really said, well, this is amazing. In 20 minutes, we had all the 5 million records from CRM into this service. We could turn on Customer 360. We could build a Power App so it shows up on a mobile device which can be used by the server and the pub. That was really mind-blowing for them. Infosys, different industry, much larger organization, but that doesn't only go with the customer, but think about opportunity. They want to bring all the data together, which is making up the 360 view of an opportunity. What is actually impacting an opportunity to be won or to be lost? And last but not least, Virgin Atlantic. Very famous brand, airline. Maybe some of you have been flying Virgin coming here to Orlando. For them, it's all about customer experience. How can they use data to create a better customer experience when using their service? So I think that is something we will see. Also to mention partners like Verypark, they have been building vertical solutions on top of what you will see here, taking these concepts and build a customer 360 view for banking. So very powerful. Sonata, they do the same thing for retail and travel industry, or Lithium, well known for doing this community management and bringing social information, their scores here. That shows you this is a platform which allows you to bring all the data together and turn that into intelligent action. So with that, I want to hand over to Santosh to really go deep, and hope you enjoy. Santosh.
It's not going to work again. I'm going to do a demo today that's mostly going to be talking in the context of an airline. We have 2 or 3 different demos that we're going to walk you through to show the capabilities of customer insights. But before I get started with all of the details in terms of how customer insights works, I really want to take this opportunity to step back and talk about an example of an airline. Siegfried just talked about Virgin, but in a typical airline scenario, in order to have a better understanding of what who your loyal customers are, you really need a lot of different data sources that have to come together in order to build that profile of a customer that you can work with. And in our case, we really want to start thinking about these customers as their frequent flyer profile, as an example. This is something that you might have from a loyalty system such as Siebel. You might have data about their service incidents that have come up. Again, there is passenger and reservation data that comes in from your reservation systems. You want to understand how likely people are to fly, what they're doing on board, whether using onboard Wi-Fi, what kind of travel do they do, who are their co-passengers, do they tend to travel more for holidays or for business. You want to understand who your most efficient booking agents are. So as you start to pull together all of this information from a variety of different sources, it becomes a problem of actually trying to pull together this volumes and volumes of data from numerous different sources. Of course, the biggest challenge that we have is that in order to take on a project such as this, it becomes a pretty onerous task. It's a pretty massive, unending task in a sense. So it's important that in order to be able to build a customer 360, as well as to gather insights from the data, you can start with whatever is the easiest to get to, and then build upon that gradually. And that's why, that's really how and why it's important to have a metadata-driven system that we can use in order to, incrementally build our insights, incrementally improve our business processes into sales, marketing, and servicing, and so on. So, we need to, focus in, and we'll talk about this in more detail. I want to start off by doing a talk about the metadata-driven systems. And the details that I'm going to go into today is I'm going to talk about the data and connectors. I'm going to talk about the inbuilt capabilities. And then we'll talk about the extensibility that is available with customer insights. And finally, we'll talk about how you can build finished solutions end-to-end. Okay? Siegfried, while you're doing this, can you help me for a second? Can you pull up Control on your laptop? It's not working. Okay, cool. Okay. So how does customer insights work? In customer insights, we have a variety of different data sources as a service that Siegfried just talked about. We have the ability. It's an end-to-end SaaS service, as I talked about earlier. We allow you to bring together data from a variety of different sources. You can actually connect to user connectors that have semantic knowledge of various different data sources. So you can, for example, connect to CRM, and you can connect to, you can use our APIs. You can use Office 365 connector. We have another connector for Microsoft Social Engagement that you can use to bring in social data. Of course, we have an Azure Storage connector as well. So if you want to bring in vast amounts of telemetry data from websites and so on, you can easily bring that together. In addition, we have a very simple entity model that is based on profiles and interactions. I'll talk very briefly about it. And finally, the advanced analytics capabilities that are available out of the box are primarily focused on the machine learning and the KPIs and predictions that you can do, as well as the number of segments and predictive match that you can apply. And finally, we enable you to easily, this is available out of the box, where you have native and embedded experiences that allow you to very quickly, light up these capabilities in the context of the end user applications as well as the business processes. So that in a nutshell is how everything that you see in the center is available as a SaaS service. It allows you to easily automate with a few clicks, get it all configured up and running. And of course, you can keep adding additional data sources and improve your data models over time, apply the insights as it grows. So why do we need a metadata-driven system? As I earlier talked about, when we are starting small, there is no, single unique view of, holistic view of a customer that emerges from, let's say 2 or 3 different data sources that you have easy access to. When you're going to start with those 2 or 3 different data sources, it's invariably going to result in the fact that, you want to be able to incrementally bring about that view of the customer, right? The model of the customer. And if you have to re-implement that every single time you add a new data source, that adds to the cost. It adds to the development effort that goes into this. Which is why in Customer Insights, we decided to invest heavily into a metadata-driven system where you can incrementally define types and improve them over time. So for example, if I start off with a profile of a passenger in the context of Contoso Air, where I have a frequent flyer who, today I might know what their preferences are, what their contact information is. I might know that you prefer an aisle seat, that you are you have a preference for a vegetarian meal, let's say. I mean, those can be a few of the select parameters that I know about you, and maybe your home airport, right? In my case, it's SeaTac, right? But if I bring in more about the next iteration of data that I bring in is about my family, right? It's who are my co-passengers that I'm likely to fly with. Then I need to further enhance that model by allowing me to incorporate those additional attributes. Talk about what my relationship is with potentially my kids, my family, who are my co-dependents, who are the minors I travel with, which company do I work for? There might be programs that we have about corporate affiliation. So that's why it's important to bring in, to build a metadata-driven system so that you can incrementally add these additional attributes, incrementally add additional entities, and have the system grow with you as you start to, apply these insights into different systems, without having to recode everything, without having to reprogram it. So in our worldview, there are, the basic time series data that we model is through interactions, which is the verbs that you can think of them. These represent events and actions. And a lot of the bulk data that we bring into the system comes in as interactions. The next major entity type that we have is with profiles. And this is basically having, these represents any business resource that you're trying to profile. You can profile customers, but you can also, profile, let's say in the context of, again, coming back to the example we're talking about, which is Contoso Air, or, an airline. I might want to profile families as well. I might want to profile my fleet. I might want to profile, certain flight segments, let's say from the London to Frankfurt segment, and see what is the profile of all of the users who fly on that segment. Because the profile of the London Frankfurt segment is much more likely to be business oriented as opposed to the London Ibiza, right? Because that's much more likely to be a holiday, the segment of the users who are likely to fly on that segment are likely to be, holidays. So being able to understand, in the different resources within my business and how do I profile them, that's another important part of this. And of course, the next iteration that we build upon, in customer insights is relationships, where you want to understand, for example, in my case, if I am profiling, me as a passenger, then my preferred home airport is SeaTac. So that's a relationship that I have with the SeaTac airport, right? But then I'm also tend to fly most often between Seattle and Mumbai, because that's where my family lives, right? My extended family lives. So again, that's a segment that I'm much more likely to be flying than any other segment, right? So understanding those relationships, and if I fly with my wife, if she has a passenger profile, a frequent flyer profile, then being able to understand who the co-passengers are, I think that's again another relationship you might want to model. And then links in our case define how we bring all of the data together and map it from one entity to another. These are probably a little more advanced concepts at this stage than I really want to go into. So it's all going to come together as I start to go into the details next, right? The other major element before I go into the more of the capabilities, and this is the most advanced we're going to ever get in this session, is talking about links, right? So the reason I'm emphasizing this is that we talked about being able to incrementally profile users and being able to learn as more data comes into the system. And this is our pivotal model, which enables us to adaptively profile our customers and new entities. So as an example, if I have a survey response that comes in, right? And a customer fills out a survey and they talk about their brand preference, as an example, right? Now, I want to be able to use that to understand, what is the relationship, what is the link between the survey response that has come in. Excuse me. Oh, actually, it loaded already.
Oh, a little bit.
It did, yes. I'm hoping. Oh, finally it started working. Thank you. That's good. Thanks, though. Sorry, I was having issues with my laptop. It just, for some reason, it was failing on the network. I was hoping to get a backup. Okay. Right. So it finally connected. Sorry, I'm running dry. So when I fill out the survey response, I really want to, that's a simple interaction that arrives from, one of my, let's say, a mobile app or wherever else. You want to be able to take that simple event of a survey response that came in and identify who's a user that is filling out that survey, which basically is going to give me the sentiment of that user, what they have to say about us. And then second, I want to understand what they're talking about. So I really want to, if this survey is about, let's say in this case, like something like one of the brands that we have, let's say Fourth Coffee, then you want to understand what is the relationship to that brand, so that when I extract out the sentiment and other KPIs from that survey, I want to be able to associate my affinity towards that brand, right? So, links, reference links in particular in customer insights just allow you to basically build that relationship and easily understand when a survey response comes in to say, who are the participants within it, right? In this case, the brand is a participant as well as the user is a participant. And then finally, the other type of links we have, and this is where we introduce the notion of an adaptive profile, is being able to materialize or adapt a profile based on an activity that has occurred in the real world. Why is this important? It's important because you're not always going to have information about every single customer in every single scenario, right? When you have, let's say, let's take the example again of the airline. If a new reservation comes into the system, that user may never have flown with Contoso Air before, right? Now, what I want to be able to do is take the simple event of a reservation and materialize a profile, a placeholder profile. Even if I know nothing else about that user, I have a very basic information about their name, right? At the least, I can start to put that into place and possibly a date of birth, right? And now that I have that seed profile, over time, we can start, when that reoccurs in another reservation, we can start to enhance that profile, have it grow over time. So being able to, the power of the metadata-driven system and having this ability where you have data streaming in continuously and being able to learn from it is really important, so that for the next time that the user, after they've flown, let's say 3 segments, if they come around and sign up for my frequent flyer program, they might provide me with 6 other attributes, then I can go and use to enrich the profile next, right? So those are the primary entities that we use in customer insights that are based on how we go about building these views. So I'm going to switch gears and do a very quick demo. So, let's take a look at what the end result of customer insights is. So I'm going to search for a passenger here, and this is my customer 360 view that I've already created. And what I'm going to do here is excuse me. Right. So I'm pulling together a customer 360 view of a passenger named Alexei Rollins, right? Here, what I want to do simply is being able to look up the user and understand who they are. I pulled together data from, from my frequent flyer system, let's say my loyalty program. But I also want to understand who Alexei is, and in this case, literally, the full journey of the customer with the airline. In this case, of course, the journey itself consists of a number of different journeys. So I want to understand, what flights they've taken, how they've, traveled with us, what they've said about in various surveys, and so on. And when we talk about the information that we have, from not just from the loyalty system, which gives me the basic preferences that they have, but also about this data that I want to derive from every reservation that they've made and every flight they've taken, where I want to understand, for example, how often have they flown to Paris to Charles de Gaulle, right? And they might have flown to this is Frankfurt, right? So, or I want to understand when they traveled to Guangzhou. What did they do on those flights? Did they fly economy? Did they fly business class? What kind of meals did they order? Did they use onboard Wi-Fi? So I can start to pull together all of this data from these systems that are coming in from that joins together data from my frequent flyer system as well as from my reservation system. In addition, we might have targeted Alexei with a variety of different campaigns and segments. So here, I want to understand which segments was he a part of, right? What was he targeted for? Here was a campaign for all male passengers, right? What has he said in survey responses? I also want to pull together my insights about the predictions I've made about Alexei. So if I have a co-branded credit card for my airline, that gives you mileage points, then I really want to be very quickly able to pull together information about how likely is Alexei to sign up for that prediction, and being able to see what he has done when I do target him with certain offers on whether he accepted the offer or not, right? So with the Customer 360 view in Customer Insights, you can pull together all of this information that basically consists of, information from your CRM systems, information from, various third-party data sources, including passenger and so other, social data, survey data, as well as predictions and other capabilities that we've built in, right? We also have the ability to do predictive match. So if here we don't have a credit profile, but as an example, I'm going to actually show you another user where if I have actually sourced data in order to do a better targeting of my credit card offers, I might have purchased data from a third-party system for credit rating. So being able to actually join together that data where I'm not likely to have a social security number, for example, for my frequent flyers, but how do I then join together data from these third-party sources with the data that we have about the frequent flyers? And one of the capabilities that we have in Customer Insights that does that is predictive match, where it uses contextual information in order to build together those kind of insights. And I'm going to show you that capability next as well, right? So this is a quick overview of what we can do with Customer Insights. Okay. All right, let me just switch gears here. One of the other things we want to do here is I want to show you the adaptive profiling aspect that we talked about earlier. So I have a Power App here, and in the case of Alexi, that was the email address was, sorry, it's $8.90 here. So for example, if we have an app here that is going to ask a survey question, I talked about the fact that we really want these surveys to be attributed back to the individual so that we can link the to the event of the survey back with the customer very easily, and then further use that to enrich our profile of that customer. So let's see that in action. So when I look it up and find the user called A. Rowlands, what I want to be able to do is, I'm still having network issues again, I apologize. I don't know what's going on with my laptop at this stage. I think I've been take a few minutes to redo my connection, but okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to the demo and then move on with the presentation, and maybe Siegfried can help me with the other tabs in the meantime on his laptop. Excuse me. Sorry. It's really slow. Siegfried, can you open up the Power App? And the Power App is open? Oh, sorry. Oh, thank you. Right, so we're going to come back to this, I think, let everything settle while I'm talking to. So let's talk about the capabilities, and then we'll come back and do a long demo rather than breakup of demos that I planned earlier, right? So there are, what happens after we bring in all of these data together in Customer Insights? We primarily have 4 different native capabilities that are built into Customer Insights as of our current state in our preview. Of course, there's more coming in the in our roadmap. So the first one is being able to build a Customer 360 that I just showed you. In order to build a Customer 360, I really want to pull together data from a number of different sources, whether those are email, what are my relationships with people, which websites have I visited, if I have web pages, where are they coming in, what are they doing in terms of their shopping cart, or what they're buying from me, and so on. With the Customer 360, I want to basically be able to stitch together all of that data in order to build my customer journey, and then further use that in order to make my predictions, apply it for machine learning, and build AI. So with Customer Insights, but the problem though is that, while this is a capability that we just showed you, sometimes this data is not really well known, which is to say that we don't have the identity in order to link a certain user with, let's say, the chat conversation we've had with them on let's say, Twitter, or the data that I might have from them from a third-party data source. And that's where, being able to, resolve that inconsistent identity from different systems becomes important in order to get a better understanding of the individuals. So, as an example, if I have data from CRM and, in addition, I have data I'm pulling together from Exchange, from let's say, Skype, I might have data from third-party marketing lists and websites and social forums. So I want to be able to, join that together, and I might have a very clear identity based on email address between my customer profile and my email, my Exchange data. But I might not have that in the case of, let's say, a credit agency report that I'm getting from a third party. Just the very fact, certain names are fairly common. So, let's say if you have, John Phillips, that's a fairly common enough name where you're not going to be able to resolve that without an email address or any other strong ID between two different data sources, particularly if they're coming from third parties. So another example might be, where you have web events where somebody comes to your website, or post something on a social media where there's not a clear linkage between their social handle and what you know about them from CRM. And that's where, being able to use the predictive match in order to use the contextual and intelligence information from all of these data sources becomes that much more important. In predictive match and Customer Insights, we have the ability to use individual names. It understands, for example, the variations between nicknames and initials and how you use those. What are the most likely typographic errors that you're likely to make. And it uses all of that information in addition to phone number, organization names. As an example, if I tell you that my employer is, let's say, Wells Fargo Bank, right? Now, that's in some places that might appear as Wells Fargo, and in other places it might be Wells Fargo Bank, it might be Wells Fargo Finance, Mortgage, who knows, right? But I just said Wells Fargo, right? Being able to resolve that and understand what it means is very important sometimes, because there can be cases where you have to understand, what is the weightage of each word. There can be arbitrary words in many cases, but it's much more important, for example, to match. You're much more likely to match Wells Fargo with Wells Fargo Mortgage or Wells Fargo Bank compared to, let's say, Bank of America and Wells Fargo Bank. Just because the word bank is common doesn't actually mean anything, right? So being able to understand, based on just the statistical variations and the learning that we do to understand which words are important in an organization name is how predictive match operates. Well, it can go and crawl and learn, which words have more meaning and which words don't in organization names, in order to make that match much more meaningful. Similarly, there are a lot of variations to addresses and locations. Web domains have the same problem. And there's a lot of context and intelligence that is built into predictive match and Customer Insights that allows you to take data from these two different data sources and join it together, and it will produce a confidence score for you to say, for these two given records, do they belong to the same individual or the same customer or not, right? So how does this work? In the case of predictive match, it will actually make you can, for example, map, Alexandra Andrews here and Alex Andrews on the other side. The logical ways is that you're likely to think the second Alex Andrews is likely to match the first one on the right. But, it may well be that if you look at the phone number again and bring that into play, you might realize that Alex might actually be a nickname for Alexandra as well, right? Whereas Alex Andrews that we know on the left might have a more official spelling with using KS in an Eastern European style, right? So being able to, this is where, predictive match can use phonetics, it can use, all of the contextual information in order to join together data. Even when there's no foreign keys, there's no links between the data across different systems. So this actually allows you to, for example, draw inferences from the data and link it all together in customer insights. The next feature I want to talk about is predictive scoring. Here, I'm going to talk about, I'm going to show you this in action again, where it's, traditionally when you talk about anticipating outcomes and risks, there's a lot of different types of predictions that are important to us. Which leads should I focus on? That's classically we do predictive lead scoring for that. Cases that may escalate, we want to focus in on those cases and take action in order to resolve those. Opportunity conversion, again. So traditionally, each of these different problems has required a different machine learning model, a different analytical solution in order to light up these customer insights. The classical approach in order to build all of this is that you start off with labeled data, right? You have all of your historical data of the leads that have been qualified or the opportunities that have been converted, and then you would, use data transformation and feature extraction in order to, build your features for machine learning. You would do model training. You have to do validation, you have to go score it and apply it and monitor it and before you integrate it into your business process. Of course, you can buy solutions for this, but the solution that you're going to buy for lead scoring is going to work only for lead scoring, and it is going to make certain assumptions about how your leads are formatted and what data sources it can support and or not, right? So what that ends up with is that either you buy solutions that are custom built for a certain problem and work with certain sets of data pre-configured, but they're not really that extensible, or you have to, if you really want custom data support, then you have to use your data scientists in order to do that. With customer insights, the solution is actually a lot more simpler. This is designed for a citizen data scientist. All we ask you is to identify the attribute you want to predict, and it will confirm and the next step you have to do, it will go auto-generate the machine learning model for you, and you can confirm the results, you can grade and apply it. And it will continuously deploy this to your system and operationalize this model. How does this actually work, right? Well, with the metadata-driven system that we have and the models that we talked about with relationships and profiles, what customer insights can do is, it leverages a lot of data science from Microsoft Research, where we've brought in the best of the techniques that are available today in order to explore all of the different relationships that are available. And there's literally a graph database underneath that maps out the relationships and attributes and the links between them. And it actually crawls the graph to understand that when you talk about a lead, what are all of the different entities that are related to a lead? Is it related to an account? Is it related to the primary contact who's, that you're trying to reach out to? If there's any interactions that have happened with it, there are any emails that have been exchanged with it, it is going to go look at the time series of that data, try to extract information from that. And it's going to continuously explore all of that in order to build this insight about that. So, as it actually takes that approach, it's going to use that in order to find all of the signals that are associated with that user. It is going to focus in on what are the different features that are available. It is going to also automatically analyze every signal, every data variable to understand, what is the variation between that. How does it, look at the whether something, if it's a string, should it be a categorical feature or should it be, based on treated as a numeric or something else? How does it do this? Well, it actually has an AI engine underneath which understands the different data models and the different capabilities that are available within machine learning, and it matches your various data attributes for their data type and the variance between them and their statistics to the different features that are possible that can be extracted out of it. And it uses all of that in order to build the machine learning model, and it will also automatically do the hyperparameter tuning and everything else that goes underneath to determine which of those models is the most accurate, and it produces that model, suggests it for you, and gives you the option to deploy it into production, right? So, and then of course you have the choice to bucketize your results, decide which of those leads are the most promising so that you can follow up on them further and apply them into your business process. As an example, if I am grading my leads, if the leads that are the most promising and likely to convert, in the range of, let's say, 75 to 100, those are the ones that I want to focus on right away and follow up, let's say, in person or with a phone call, versus the others that are might be potentially lukewarm. I might have to put them into an email follow-up versus others that I want to continue to nurture over time, right? In addition to that, it also identifies all of the positive and negative influences on why it thinks that certain leads are hot, and this equally applies to anything else it does. So, for example, if you want to build a churn model, we're using the identical same approach, which is just identify the accounts that have churned in the past versus those that have not. It is going to again generate the model for you automatically, and it's going to tell you why it thinks certain models are going to, certain accounts are likely to churn versus not, based on the attributes that it has found within the data that it analyzed for you, right? With segmentation, the problem is different, where you want to be able to use, identify the cohorts of users in order to more fine-tune your message that you deliver to them. And in Customer Insights, we have a segmentation engine that is built in that is going to allow you to identify the cohort of users that are at the same stage in their life cycle. And you can do this in a much more meaningful and fine-tuned way, right? So, you can classically, we've done segmentation using either, demographic or contact attributes or behavioral attributes. In Customer Insights, we again leverage the full graph of relationships within it that allows you to understand not just the behavioral attributes of the users, but the journey that they followed in order to reach where they are with you today. And you can fine-tune the messages based on that journey. And we'll see that in action in a few minutes, right? So, and what does it mean to have a dynamic segment? Well, over time, I want to be able to, as the customer follows a different journey at different life cycle stage, I really want to be sending a different message to that user. And that's what dynamic segments allows me to do, is that as the user evolves into a different stage in the journey with me, they automatically gets promoted or removed from one segment and promoted into another, depending on this life cycle stage they are at, right? I'll talk about extensibility, I think, and then we'll go back to this. It's also important to have, once we have all of this data, yes, we talked about the native capabilities that are available within Customer Insights, but you really want to be able to extend it further and use it for Power BI, use it for Power Apps, right? So with Power BI, you can, we allow you to basically do reporting and dashboarding on the data that is available within Customer Insights. So what you can do very easily is apply the insights that you have, pull together all of the data, and build a report that that possibly is a mashup of all of the different data sources that you have within your Customer Insights. And there's within your enterprise. And being able to pull together that into a single view and being able to do that mashup allows you to understand the full business picture that is much more meaningful for your executive leadership and so on, right? And of course, you can use it. We also have a Power Apps connector for Customer Insights, where you can much more meaningfully target the data, target the message, and build an experience that is much more refined for a given business process that you are pursuing. All right. So let me take a look. Should work now? Cool. Thank you. Right. So, I talked about this earlier where here's a Power App that we did for the airline scenario. And let's say, imagine that, I want to be able to take this survey question and I post this, like how often do you, pay additional fees? Sorry? Oh, I haven't switched. I apologize. Right. Thank you. So, I want to be able to take a airline seat, right? So, like how likely are you to pay, it's a survey question that I want to run. Are you likely to pay an additional fee in order to get a premium seat or with more legroom, perhaps, right? And I might say maybe once in a while, right? And I do a submit here, right? Now, one of the things you really want to do at this stage is that I might use this in order to offer, let's say, one-time free onboard Wi-Fi coupon in order to get some people to take my survey. Now, what you want to be able to do at this stage is, have this data show up in customer insights on my user's journey, right? To say, what are they saying? What is their attribute? And use this as, their propensity to buy that additional seat, so that you can, you have to make now a decision on whether for those additional legroom seats, should you be making an offer to this user, or is that something that they would appreciate a voucher for in order to build better loyalty over time, right? So, being able to use that in order to, so let's see it show up, hopefully. Yeah. So if I refresh the Customer 360 view for Alex that we saw earlier, I should be able to now see that survey response appearing on that attribute, on his customer journey, right? So this is where being able to incrementally have events that are arriving in the system link back to the individuals that we were targeting becomes very useful in the context of customer of understanding a 360 view of the customer, right? So, when I come in here, and you can see this, the top survey question is the one that I just entered, right? Which was the, how likely are you to pay for the additional seat? So this is where, now that it's an attribute linked to that user, I can now use it not just for understanding is next time that I have a marketing segment that I'm building in order to run a campaign for, let's say, which individuals should I make the offer to? You can use this to customize not just the marketing campaign, but also potentially to customize your web experience, so that what do they see when they visit your website, and what do they see during the reservation process, right? Right. So let's take a look at some of the other capabilities that we talked about in earlier, right? So one of the other capabilities I highlighted was the predictive scoring. So in predictive scoring, in customer insights, as I earlier mentioned, it's very the main thing that I really want to do, and let's take a look at how easy this is. So if I want to build a new predictive scoring model in customer insights, I can say, let's take the example of a co-branded credit card. I want to see who are the individuals who are most likely to sign up for a co-branded credit card with Contoso Air. So I can start off with CC offer, and this is my credit card offer, and this is the people who've converted, right? I'm trying to predict who are the people who will sign up and convert to this offer, and all I have to do in this case is identify the offer status, right, attribute. So here. Oops, sorry. So here, when I select the offer status, here are the people who accepted in the past, and the negative outcome is the people who in the past have declined my offer, right? Now, what it is going to do at this stage is that once I've entered this information and hit create, it's literally going to fire off the whole pipeline that I just talked about. It is going to start with the users that I know about in the system, who in the past either accepted or declined the offer. It is going to start from there and do a complete walk. And this is, again, the power of the metadata-driven system, because now it understands the metadata and the relationship between the entire data, the repository of data you have. It is going to analyze what are the credit scores. What are the people who, what prior segments have they been targeted in? For people on their survey responses, what did they say? Were they likely to pay for that extra legroom or not? It is going to take every single attribute it knows about. It is going to analyze it, and it's going to try to convert those, do all of the data transformations that are necessary in order to build a machine learning model. And once that model is built, you can now choose to deploy it into production. This process, of course, given the amount of data it's analyzing and the amount of work it has to do, it takes a process about anywhere from 15 minutes to about an hour, depending on the volume of data that you have. In this case, I have hundreds of attributes on this data model with thousands of different records. You can actually push this up to hundreds of thousands, and it'll still finish it in a reasonable amount of time. And this is primarily because it is doing a statistical analysis of the attributes. But let's take a look at what has happened in the other one. So I have a model that I fired off earlier, and it's available, and you can see it has identical settings to what I entered. But what do I get after the model is finished? Well, I can see the results of the model, right? So it has now analyzed all of this, and it can tell me, what is the propensity, what is the accuracy with which this model is going to function, and tell you whether somebody's going to convert or not. So it has a 72% accuracy for the people who actually accept the offers. It has a 27% accuracy on the people who decline, and that's usually very common because particularly the people who decline tend to be a lot more than the people who accept, and that's what you really want to focus on. You want a higher positive accuracy, but you can always fine-tune the models depending on what kind of data that you have. And of course, it's actually telling me what the top predictors are, right? It is their income. It is their past purchase history that I got from the credit report. It is the loyalty and the prediction scores that I have in the past. It's a loyalty prediction, not the, I have the credit card prediction, but the people who are more loyal are the ones that are likely to get my co-branded credit card. And of course, now I can bucketize this, right? So I can, and that's what the buckets at the bottom are all about, where I can focus in and say, depending on my business process and the type of offers and the segment and campaigns I'm running, I can bucketize them into the top 10%, the top 20%, maybe two buckets with here by default does 50-50, but here's a lower end of the spectrum who are less likely to buy others. But I can of course fine tune this and change the likelihood. So let's say if I go this and make this, let's say 30, right? And you can see that it's going to actually change this, yeah. I think sometimes the accuracy is the same for different values. So, right. So if I change the score to the threshold to 80, now the positive outcome, the baseline conversion for this bucket is 85%. And this tells me also that with following up with just 11% of the users, I'll get a much higher conversion factor for the people that I'm trying to pursue for this offer. Right? So let's take a look at the segmentation capabilities. So we talked about earlier, the dynamic segments and how these evolve over time. So what I want to be able to do in this case is define a segment of users that is based on certain events that have occurred within my system, right? So we're having more network issues. These forms are just not loading. Right. While the segment runs low, let's talk about predictive match. So I talked about earlier predictive match, being able to use the contextual and information in order to join together data from various different sources. In customer insights, what you have to do simply is identify the different data sources. Here I have the leads, which is coming in from a credit reporting agency, third-party data source, and the data that I have in CRM, which is my customers. And I'm actually taking just the attributes, which is the name attribute here and the full name, and joining it all together, and just applying the inbuilt algorithm that I have about first names, or rather individual names, to these attributes. Similarly, I'm applying the address algorithm that is built in that can take partial information about addresses in order to join together these three different street address, city, and country in order to match it against the address from my credit reporting agency. And given that the address can have so many different variations in terms of how it is represented, whether it's, you write ST or street and so on, it's going to actually use that, everything it knows about the different variations and how addresses are represented in order to join together these two data streams and produce a score that is going to give you with a certain amount of confidence, how these two different records are related within it. So, we can see that, that we talked about earlier. This time, hopefully. Well, where you can actually see this in the context of a customer 360 as well, where it's going to actually show me that here is an individual that I've searched for, Juan Lubman. But I can see what are the predictive matches that I'm getting for this individual. So, for example, I can see that the 94% confidence I found a record from the credit report that actually matches the one that I know about for Juan. Now, in the case of predictive match, I can, of course, apply a threshold as well, where I can say, for example, if the confidence exceeds 90%, then use it by default, so that in the machine learning models, in the segmentation and other places, in the other business processes, every record that actually exceeds that level of confidence is going to automatically accrue towards the individual CRM user that I found, and is going to use it to enrich the data, right, that we use for predictions and other analytics. The second part of this that I was talking about is the segmentation. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to define a dynamic segment here. And I've defined a few other segments that are already existing within my service, but primary among them is the ability to select the attributes, provide different values for them, and it's automatically going to accrue towards building that segment for those individuals, right? Okay. Not sure what's happening with the segmentation at this stage. So let's take a look in the meantime while this is coming, settling into the other capabilities that are built in. I talked earlier about the Power BI dashboard. All of the KPIs, all of the predictions, all of the profiles that we've defined within Customer Insights are available in are available via connector, a Customer Insights connector that is available in Power BI as well. I can actually use that in order to further enrich that data and build reports and dashboards about it. So here, for example, is my Power BI dashboard that is now taking all of the information that I knew. For example, this is the distribution that we have in our sample data set for business class and economy. This was the flights by aircraft, and it's accruing towards it. And I can start to compose these dashboards, and in my enterprise reporting and data warehousing solutions that I build, as well as the more targeted, role-specific reports that I want to deliver, for example, to my leadership, I can now bring in data from Customer Insights in addition to the other data sources. And of course, it's very simple to do this with a simple data connector. You can use get data, and here we have a new data connect. I should probably search for this. It's faster. So we have a connector for Customer Insights. So everything that you put into Customer Insights, as well as all of the predictions and matches and segments that you built, are now available for reporting as well, right? Of course, we've already seen the Power Apps in action, where we took the survey, but it's a very similar concept. You have a connector available to Customer Insights from Power Apps as well, that you can use in order to tap into the complete REST API that is available in order to build your more customized experiences, right? Now, when we talk about all of these different capabilities, let's switch gears and talk about how you actually apply all of this. So, it's one thing to build all of this, and we saw that most of this was built with, it's for a data analyst. You don't have to be an expert a developer in order to build these systems. You can start to do your profiling. You can start to build your predictions. You can start to build your customer 360s simply by bringing in data from various sources. But it's also important to have much more finished solutions as well. And this is where we want to be able to do this with, like one of the first ones that we built was Relationship Insights. This is available as a finished solution within Dynamics. If you might have attended sessions on this earlier, but if you're not familiar with this, then it primarily gives you the health of your relationship in the context of an opportunity or an account. We can, it's one of those solutions where just by simply deploying the solution, it automatically connects to your data, automatically provisions and brings in the right profiles, interactions that it needs, and creates these views for you that you can deploy into and have it be running. One of the other solutions that we are working on right now is a predictive lead scoring solution, which is an out-of-box lead scoring that you can apply, and I'll show you that next. But it's very simply, this is it automatically discovers all of the different leads that you have, as well as the different data that you have available from CRM, as well as any other data source that you connect to, and produce a lead scoring model for you. So, yeah, I'm just finished. 1 second. So just very quickly on that one, when I actually define a lead scoring model, in Customer Insights, it's actually going to be something that I can deliver in the context directly of my CRM itself, right? So all of my forms in CRM are now enriched with data about, sorry, am I projecting the right one? Nope, I'm not. This is the RI stuff that I talked about, Relationship Insights, where my opportunity and contact forms are enriched with the data that is coming in from DCI, from Customer Insights. Similarly, when we load up the data in the context of the CRM attributes, you can see the predictive lead score and the dashboard that is coming in from Customer Insights. All of these solutions can, of course, be packaged into app source and deployed very simply. And the finished solutions don't even require the configuration that you need. It is simply a matter of just deploying the solution, where it finds the requisite data sets and deploys them directly for you into your business process. We're running a little out of time, so I don't think we have time to do the whole lead scoring demo at this stage. We lost a little bit of time in the process. So I think we're just going to close at this stage, and we'll take questions afterwards, and we're happy to show you later as well. Right? So, what do you get with lead scoring? You'll get a lead pipeline dashboard, which actually pulls together and segments all of your leads along with your predictions, by different data sources, by the different source of the leads, by region, by account, and so on. And of course, you can see that in the context of the lead forms itself in CRM, where you'll be able to see that along with their scores and the top predictive values that drive into that experience for you. Right? So in summary, what is customer insights all about? So let's take a look at the classical approach. Typically, you would need a custom-built analytical platform in order to light up these capabilities. With customer insights, it's a finished SaaS solution. There's a time to implement is typically in the order of months if you were to build a 360 or a customer insights solution. With customer insights, you can get to the end stage in a matter of weeks. And of course, instead of the deep technical ability and developer expertise you would need, this is something that business analysts can use and deploy directly into production. Right? Siegfried, do you know?
So thanks a lot, Santosh. So I hope you understand with all the technical issues we had, we couldn't show everything. We are at the booth, so if you have time and want to see more, come to the Microsoft Expo area and see that. And thanks a lot for your attention, and looking forward to connect with you. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.